Diamond Dogs is an album about dogs that rock and roll. Do dogs rock and roll? Sure they do. Let me tell you a story that begins with a dog that rocks. Once upon a time, in the early 1950s, there were two American youngsters called Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, who teamed up and formed a songwriting duo. Typically for Jewish kids of the time, the two held firm liberal ideas, which in their case manifested mainly as love for the culture of the Black American people, and interest in their struggle to make it in America. Well versed in black lingo and black music, they wrote songs that celebrated the daily life of blacks and offered them to rhythm and blues artists to perform. In 1953, they wrote a song called Hound Dog, which isn't really a song about a dog, but actually about a woman chastising her no-good man and telling him to take a hike. The song was performed by Big Mama Thornton, who took it all the way to the top of the R&B chart, giving our duo their first hit. Delighted, they told their left-wing mates about their success, but received a cold shower. Pop music, they were told, is one of the ways in which the capitalist system exploits the working class, and taking part in it is doing the work of the devil. That attitude didn't feel right to Lieber and Stoller, who didn't understand how something that brings joy to working class people can be bad for them. So they told their friends, "You ain't no friend of mine," and went to start their own brand of liberalism. What was wrong with their friends? To answer that, we must understand where they came from. The leftist dream is to reach a world where everyone is free and equal, and its underlying belief is that in this state, man's good nature would prevail and produce a world of peace and harmony. After the revolutions of the 18th century, it was believed that we are now on the right path to achieving this world. But in the middle of the 19th century, Karl Marx pointed out the snag. The capitalist system, which arose along with liberalism, creates two classes of people, employers and workers, and the latter are practically enslaved by the former. To reach the perfect world, said Marx, there must be one more revolution, in which the working class would revolt, eliminate the capitalist system, and create a truly equal society. The capitalist system, then, was perceived as the only thing standing in a way to utopia. Consequently, Marxists began to perceive it as the root of all evil, the thing that is responsible for poverty, wars, bigotry, crime, and any other cause of suffering. In Marx's time, this perception was rooted in daily experience. The working class was extremely poor and exploited, and this condition was indeed the cause of a lot of misery. It made sense for people to believe that if this injustice would be removed, all problems would go away. But after decades of struggle that dramatically improved conditions for the working class, it became apparent that things aren't that simple. By the middle of the 20th century, most educated people realize that the problems of humankind come from many sources, and it is naive to believe that there is just one root of evil, whose removal would fix everything. Some, however, kept holding on to their Marxist faith, refusing to let go. The better conditions of the working class, they claimed, are merely sedatives aimed to distract the people from their basically exploited state. The function of art, according to this belief, is to make people face their true condition, so that they will rise up and overthrow the system. Pop music, which concentrates on having fun in the capitalist society, was therefore vehemently rejected. Marxists do not want the working class to have fun. They want them to become pawns in their revolutionary dream. Lieber and Stoller, however, were already beyond this crude way of thinking. They were true liberals, wanting to express the many ways in which the human free spirit manifests itself. Working with a black doo-wop group called the Robins, they produced 3-minute comedies rooted in daily life, and in 1954 they came up with the real doozy. Riot in Cell Block No. 9 is a highly charged drama about a riot that breaks in a jailhouse, performed by the Robins with the reinforcement of a bass singer called Richard Berry, who tells a story with a voice full of menace and mischief, and the result is pure exhilaration. It was one of the main portents for the dawn of a new period in music, a period called rock and roll, and the record already sets one of rock and roll's main tenets. It sounds at first like a jailbreak, with the prisoners breaking loose and using dynamite to blow up stuff, but then you realize that they are not going anywhere. They just want to stay there and have a riot. In the end, the wardens manage to regain control and put everyone back in their cells, but the record ends with the promise that, every now and then, there's a riot going on. The record bequeaths a dream to the rock and roll period, a dream of a world of never-ending rebellion, never-ending riots, and never-ending fun. This is the dimension that is missing from the revolutionary approach of Marxism. Marxists describe human existence as suffering, and preach that life should be dedicated to ending all suffering. But they fail to realize that suffering is no longer a big part of life in the Western world. The combination of social reforms and the advancement of technology made life a lot easier, gave people a lot of leisure time, and they care less about how to abolish the small remnants of suffering and discomfort that are left, and more about how to find happiness in life. The result is pop culture, a culture dedicated to producing actual, palpable joys. Marxism aspires to reach a state of non-suffering, but the children of pop culture know that non-suffering is merely a neutral state, while above it there are states of elation and ecstasy, which are all within our reach. And one of the greatest joyous experiences, at least when you are young, is to rebel against authority, to have a wild riot within the confines of the square world of the adults. The Marxist solution is rejected, therefore, not just because it is unfounded, but simply because it is not good enough. The idea of living in some constant state of non-suffering does not compare to living within a society that, on the one hand, gives you enough freedom to pursue your happiness, and on the other hand contains enough repression for you to be able, every now and then, to have a riot. Rock and roll kids don't want a revolution that will fix everything. They want a world where you can always riot. Riot in Cell Block No. 9 was a manifesto of this state of mind. And, within a year of the record's release, the riot was going on like a forest on fire. A new monster was set upon the world, a monster called rock and roll, and the youth embraced it enthusiastically. Lieber and Stoller were playing their part, working with a doo-wop group called the Coasters, and kept providing their brand of rock and roll theater. But the king of the new style was Elvis Presley, and the song that crowned him was his rocking rendition of Hound Dog. When he performed the song on TV, swiveling his hips suggestively, the walls of Western culture trembled. For the culture guardians, this was a sign of degeneration, of the decline of civilization. But for the youth, it was a new world. Elvis was the symbol of this new spirit, and when he moved into cinema, he contracted Lieber and Stoller to write the soundtrack for his first musical, Jailhouse Rock. The title track is basically a rewrite of Riot in Cell Block No. 9, except that it is a wild rock and roll party instead of a riot, and it is even more self-conscious. There is a moment in which a couple of inmates notice that they have a chance to make a break, but they choose to stick around and get their kicks, because a party in prison is more fun than anything you can find on the outside. Musically, however, Jailhouse Rock was already a sign that the riot was dying down. The wild, unruly spirit is still there, but you can also sense an attempt to organize it in a more well-structured musical form. The choreography does the same to Elvis's hip-shaking style of dancing. Rock and roll was beginning to become more socially acceptable, and perceived as merely some necessary youthful venting. The music business realized that there's a huge potential market in rock and roll, and opened up to it. And once again it was Lieber and Stoller who showed the way, with the cleverly crafted records they made with the Drifters. By the turn of the decade, rock and roll became a smart and sophisticated style of pop music, aimed at teenagers. The riot was over, the dog was leashed, the spirit of youth culture was back in its cell. But the memory lingered, and in some places, the original spirit of rock and roll kept festering underground, waiting to erupt. In 1962, the Beatles managed to create a style that took the newer, more sophisticated style of rock and roll and infused it with the wild explosive spirit of early rock and roll. The result was Beatlemania, which opened the cell doors to hundreds of British bands. Led by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Brits turned rock and roll into a worldwide epidemic. The riot was on again. That's a well-known story, and it is the way that rock and roll history is usually told. But there is a lesser-known story, a secret history of rock and roll, which happened in another cell block. To tell that story, however, we must go back to 1954 and follow the trails of someone we left in cell block number 9. Richard Berry, after his stint with the Robins, went on to have a rather undistinguished musical career, but somewhere along the way, he wrote and recorded a song that enshrined his name in history. Louie, released in 1957, is a pretty weird doo-wop record, moving to a cha-cha beat and sung in Jamaican patois, the singer being a Jamaican sailor yearning for his girl back home. Not an outstanding record, really, but it is driven by an incessant da-da-da backing vocal chant, which doesn't leave your head once it settles in it. The record did alright in California, but not enough to be a big hit, and Berry sold the rights to it for $750, thinking he made a good deal. Little did he know that up north, in Seattle, a rock and roll scene was budding, and that he turned Louie into its anthem. It was no longer a doo-wop, though. The Seattle bands had an aggressive and rowdy attitude, and turned the song into a storming rocker. It was only a local scene, but it was a riot. One of the bands on the scene was the Kingsmen, who hailed from Portland. They were not considered a good band, even by the modest criteria of Seattle, but they did work hard on the Louie. Finally, in April 1963, they went into the studio to record it, but the first take was a total shambles, with the instruments missing their entries and stepping on each other, and the vocals almost unintelligible because the singer stood too far away from the microphone. The whole thing sounded wacky and ridiculous. The band was about to do a second take, but their manager, in a stroke of genius, announced that this was the best performance they ever did and decided to use it. He realized that the ridiculousness of the thing made it a laughing riot, and a riot, after all, is what rock and roll is all about. The single didn't do much at first, but then suddenly, in November, it started a fast climb up the national Billboard chart, and by the end of the year it reached number 2, dominating the chart for weeks, until it was usurped by a record called I Want to Hold Your Hand, the record that started the British invasion. All at once, the music world had 2 riots on its hands, the riot of British rock and roll and the riot of Louie, and it would never be the same again. But what happened that made the Kingsmen's record such a hit? The answer is in the recording. Because the vocals are so slurred, every listener can hear whatever they want in them, and the rumor spread that the lyrics were obscene. The teenagers were titillated, the parents were shocked and outraged, and the authorities were called upon to put an end to this pornographic phenomenon, threatening to corrupt the innocent souls of American youth. But nothing could be done. The FBI spent 2.5 years trying to make the vocal track clean enough to get the actual lyrics and establish their obscenity, but failed. Everybody knew the record was dirty, but nobody could prove it, and the attempts just added to its notoriety and kept it on the airwaves. Louie was the perfect crime, the riot that just kept on going without the wardens being able to do anything to stop it. Louie, however, was a lot more than just allegedly dirty. The spirit of mayhem that emanates from the record is utterly exhilarating, and became a symbol of the rock and roll spirit. It is the most famous example of what later became known as garage rock, music made by bands that were technically incompetent, but could express either the wild glee of the Beatles or the snarling dissatisfaction of the Stones, and that, after all, is what really matters. Over the next 5 years, countless of wannabe American bands made a lot of bad records, usually missing the mark, but occasionally producing nuggets like Wooly Bully, Psychotic Reaction, 96 Tears, I Want Candy, and many more. And the anarchic spirit of garage rock invaded the sound of the more competent British bands as well. While the British scene had a side that was embodied by Eric Clapton, who idolized the art of blues and wanted to make serious music, it also had a side that wanted to make another Louie, producing gems like the Kinks' You Really Got Me, Them's Gloria, the Trogs' Wild Thing, and many others. This pull in both directions is one of the things that made the pop music of the mid-60s so great. By 1967, however, the serious side was beginning to take over. Rock musicians started to think of themselves as artists, and instead of making records of wild abandon, they focused on making albums that showed technical accomplishment and lyrical profundity. Ideologically, too, youth culture was now infested with a frame of mind that came from the academy, which regarded rebellion as worthwhile only if it was aimed at creating a perfect world. By the late 60s, youth culture, that once offered an alternative to the old ways of thinking, deteriorated all the way back to infantile Marxist platitudes and revolutionary idiocy. That anarchic mirth, there's a riot going on, that was part and parcel of rock and roll from the start, all but disappeared by the early 70s. Bowie and the rest of the glam rockers tried to bring it back to life. With all the futurism, drag, glitter, and makeup, it's easy to forget that glam was also a return to original 50s rock and roll, to simple and explosive 3-minute records. But by mid-1973, glam was losing its rattling effect and becoming just another style. Bowie's reaction was to go back to basics, back to the mid-60s, and look for inspiration there. His album Pin-Ups covered songs from the period, and displays a penchant for garage rock, for songs of confusion, of sexual frustration, of riotous outbursts within the cycle of daily toil, songs that went against the spirit of the early 70s. The closing track, Where Have All the Good Times Gone, laments the loss of that original spirit of rock and roll, the spirit he was trying to revive. It doesn't really work, though. Although he discards the slick, punctual sound of Ziggy and the Spiders in favor of a more anarchic garage sound, he fails to create the same effect that the 60s records have. The problem is mainly in the vocals, which lack the sneer, the screaming your guts out, and the effervescent dissatisfaction of the originals. It still sounds good, updating the songs to the sound of 1973, but for anyone who is familiar with the original records, it pales in comparison, sounding weak in exactly the traits that count, the traits that define garage rock. To revive that spirit, Bowie had to create something of his own. And so, in 1974, Bowie came out with his own Louie, except that he called it Rebel Rebel. First came the single, a great slice of vintage rock and roll, but the song's full power comes to light when you hear it on the album. Diamond Dogs sets out from the premise that rock and roll is dead, painting Hunger City as filled with lifeless freak mutations, an obvious allegory to the rock world of 1974. The heroes roam the wasteland, finding nothing of worth to hang on to, and Sweet Thing ends with them sinking into a drug haze, while we hear the sound of the system grinding their spirit to dust. But then, a guitar hook a la Rolling Stones rings out loud, slicing through the rot, and everything springs back to life. It's Bowie playing that guitar, this time not relying on an ace guitarist to accompany him, but using his own limited skills to get a garage sound. We need just a couple of bars to realize what it says. There's a new riot going on. And when Bowie's vocal comes in, it is the real deal. Electrifying, energetic, horny, boisterous, nasty. Everything rock and roll should be. After whimpering like a dog on a leash for the entirety of Sweet Thing candidate Sweet Thing, now he howls like a dog that broke free, and is seriously in heat.
She's not sure if you're a boy or a girl. Hey babe,
Bowie has always tried to be unique in his songwriting, but here he is as generic as could be. Not much to analyze here. It's just rock and roll, weaving together revolt, dissatisfaction, confusion, mayhem, noise, partying, sex, and style into one bundle of eruptive ecstasy. The second line reminds us of the Barbarians' garage rock classic Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl? His Hey Babe brings to mind Booth Channel's Hey Baby, and the song's doubled-up title was a garage rock staple since Louie, continuing with classics like The Castaways' Liar Liar, Music Machines' Talk Talk, and the Shondells' Money Money. But it is more than just another garage rock record. It is a record that aims to capture the quintessence of it all, and the title says what it is: Rebellion.
Rebel, rebel, put on your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess. Rebel, rebel, how could they know? Hot tramp, I love you so.
How could they know? He asks about all those who don't take part in the riot. Those who think that rock and roll is stupid. Those who don't understand the fun of tearing your dress and messing up your face, but prefer to live their lives according to clear, rational laws of morality and beauty. From the point of view of rock and roll, this kind of people is simply living by the rules of the prison, while rock and roll sets us free of them, without imposing any new rules. In contrast to those who don't know, the singer finds that there are those who share the experience, and it makes him feel a deep connection with them, so deep that it produces the single most lustful moment in Bowie's entire work. Great lyrics for once, remarked American rock critic Lester Bangs. You've torn your dress, your face is a mess. Hot tramp, I love you so. If only Bowie could settle for that kind of simplicity all the time. Bangs, famously, led the critical attack against album-oriented rock, and demanded a return to the tenets of garage rock, a term which he practically coined, along with another term that he sometimes used for it, punk rock. Bangs and his acolytes did not like Bowie, regarding him as a representative of the cerebral, pretentious type of musicians that destroyed the original spirit of rock and roll. What they didn't get was that Bowie was also calling for a return to that spirit, but doing so while dissecting rock music through his art to look for the reasons it died. Diamond Dogs is an autopsy of rock and roll, but Rebel Rebel uses this autopsy to extract the gist of it and bring it back to life. While the rest of the album is cerebral, the centerpiece is an anthem for mindless fun, and as if to strengthen the point, Bowie just repeats the verse and chorus, and then launches once more into the chorus, directing our attention away from the lyrics and towards the spirit of the music. And then, he ends by doing something he never did before. He lets go. Allowing himself to be taken over by the thrill of the moment, he just starts a freestyle rap, improvising on the themes he presented earlier, getting further and further into it. When he sings about a live wire, he becomes a live wire himself, transmitting joy to the world. How could they know? He asks once again about all those who haven't been there, those who do not understand the joy of rock and roll. That's the thing about rock and roll. You either get it or you don't, and if you don't, no one can explain it to you. Rebel Rebel proves that Bowie, regardless of what Lester Bangs or anybody else ever claimed, certainly got it. And he knew that it has the power to save even the wretched souls of Hunger City. But Rebel Rebel is, in a way, also a farewell to this kind of experience. The rest of the album reveals Bowie's pessimism, his fear that this era has gone and rock and roll is dead. He was not aware of it yet, but in the same year that he was staging Diamond Dogs, several new rock bands formed in New York, bands whose spirit was forged in the same furnace that produced Rebel Rebel. The Ramones, Television, the Patti Smith Group, and others returned to the spirit of garage rock, usually referring to it as punk, and tried to take it in new directions. It took them a couple of years until they got the message through, but once they did, there was a riot going on.